You lost him here.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm sure you, like me, might have another screen on in your home as you're keeping an eye on the unfolding events in Washington, D.C.
No, here.
And it's not looking so good.
Thought it was looking good.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know.
Well, it depends, I guess, what side of the fence you're on, but I know your politics, Marcia. It's not looking good.
Oh, no, I thought that one of the Democrats won.
Oh, yeah, I know that part worked, but they've now stormed the Capitol and guns are drawn inside the Capitol building. So,
Oh, no, I don't know about this. Oh,
Yeah.
my
yeah, who would
God.
have thought guns in the United States?
Oh, no.
Yeah, keeping it interesting. Keeping it interesting.
Keep your border fortified, guys. I'm warning you.
Oh, we're gonna build a
Yeah.
wall.
Yeah. Build
And make
that
Trump pay
wall.
for it.
And the Americans are gonna pay for it, that's right.
Yeah.
I'll pay for this one. So we're just gonna give another couple of minutes, and we're expecting about 35 or 40 people to join us, and we're not quite there yet. We're at 17.
Couple more
Hi,
minutes.
Sharon. Hi, Sean. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Rhea, you're frozen. Either that or you're really good at sitting still. We would all like to go to Machane Yehudah right now.
Yeah, I got there a bit too early. Sorry about that one. Right.
I think if you press that,
Try that.
some other people come up.
This one muted.
They'll mute us. They'll mute it.
Yeah, we'll mute you. Don't worry. It's I think rabbis and congregants pray for the same thing. Congregants pray they can mute the rabbi in the middle of a sermon, and rabbis pray that they can mute their congregation occasionally.
In this case, you've got the control.
Right. In this case, I have the control.
Oh, he's controlling.
Yeah. So you said you just wait a couple more minutes.
Yeah, we're expecting another 20 people, 15 people or so. So I just want to give people time, parking issues and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I'm very Canadian. I got a new flannel for Hanukkah. I'd try that out today.
Do you have your toque, your winter toque?
I do. It's right here. I'm wearing a yarmulke, but I can put my toque on.
Oh, that's it. Now,
Oh,
that's the look.
I like that look. I went out one day and I'm like, when did I start dressing like a Canadian?
Never too late.
My calendar's coming back in.
How about that? You said something about a flannel, Rabbi, and I said I can't, be a part of this.
That was a congregant checking to tell me that there's gunfire in the rotunda of the Capitol in the U.S. now. And they've instructed the congressmen and the senators to get their gas masks from underneath the seats of their desks.
Oh, my God. And those are all Trump's people.
Yeah, I think it's been said throughout, they're the ones with the guns. So
Yeah.
When's the last time they had to draw guns in the rotunda?
Well, I remember hearing stories in civics class about, congressmen drawing guns on each other in the 1800s, but, Alexander Hamilton and, Burr with the duel, but I don't think this is quite that. Well, it's 12:03, and I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. I'm sure people will still join us as they do, but let me take a few minutes to introduce the program, to introduce Mike, and to just set the scene. And I just want to say, by way of introduction, also that I've been waiting for a delivery for about 10 weeks, and it might show up during this class. And if it does, my screen will go away. Mike will still be here. He's leading the session. I'm just the MC for the events. But so if I have to leave, it's because this delivery shows up and I've got to move a car and open up a gate and the whole thing. So, but until then, and since it's taken 10 weeks, it may not show up. So welcome everyone. Truthfully, it's great to see you all. It continues to be one of the great challenges of this pandemic is that we just don't see each other much. And even though it's, of course, through this medium, it is still wonderful to see you. So we are in a new year, and with that, a whole new swath of opportunities for us to connect through the temple. And one of those is this wonderful 3-part series with my good friend and teacher, Mike Hollander. Mike is an educator in Israel and as well as an Israeli tour guide. He grew up here in Vancouver, made Aliyah, as he'll tell you, 20, 30 years ago now, Mike, something like that?
32.
32 years ago. Mike has spoken at the synagogue a few times when he's been in town to visit his mother, like a good Jewish boy. And we're thrilled to have this opportunity to learn with Mike today, and even more so to also get a chance to have an on-the-ground glimpse of what's going on in Israel today. So even though Mike's going to talk about Machane Yehudah, take us on a virtual tour through the Jewish markets of Jerusalem, I've asked him to also just speak briefly about what's going on the ground in Israel. We've all read with great pride what is going on with and some curiosity about the vaccination distribution. But there's, as Mike and I were talking before, there's a lockdown that's about to begin in Israel, and the politics. So we'll briefly, Michael touch on that, and then lead us through a virtual tour of Machane Yehudah. So hopefully you had lunch already. Otherwise, it's kind of like shopping when you're hungry. You're going to want everything, which is how I feel in Machane Yehudah, whether I'm hungry or not. And just a reminder that we have another one of these. Mike, when's the next one? I didn't look ahead of time.
2 weeks, I want to say.
In 2 weeks, and the topic for that one of them's on water, but the next one I think
that's the third one. Is majority minority relations in Judea and their impact on Israel today. That's Thursday, the 21st.
Right. So hopefully you can join us for all three, and you can tell your friends. We're also recording this, so if you miss one of them, they'll be on our YouTube page later on today. I'm going to mute your microphones. Mike, I might need to unmute you in a moment, or unmute yourself. But I'm going to mute your microphones just for now. If you have questions, please put them into the chat. And then I'm sure at some point Mike will stop and ask anybody if they have questions, and you can unmute and certainly talk and have conversation. But if things come up while Mike is presenting, put the questions into the chat on the Zoom. That way they don't interrupt the flow. With that, I'm going to mute you all. You're allowed to unmute yourselves. So Mike, you can unmute yourself after this. And ladies and gentlemen, Mike Hollander, our educator for our afternoon.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. It's a pleasure to be in Temple Shalom. As you already introduced, I grew up in Vancouver. I was actually born in Montreal, but it's a real pleasure to be able to speak to a group of people and not have to apologize for my accent. So if I say I went out and about to Machane Yehudah a few times, nobody except maybe the rabbi is going to laugh at me. So I'm glad that you're all here and that I'm all there. And the challenge, as you said, Rabbi, of getting together during the past 10 months is not easy on the one hand. On the other hand, it is easier for me sitting in Modi'in, where I live in Israel, even though it's 10 o'clock at night, to be in touch with you guys at noon on the West Coast. 22 degrees here and raining by you guys. You guys have a spike in numbers of corona. We've got a very significant spike of numbers in corona. It seems that, us Jews love to have headlines. And we like to be, the best, the most Nobel laureates per capita, or the highest number of startup companies per capita, or the highest amount of venture capital invested in Israel. Great. We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about perhaps one of the most diverse and amazing food markets in the world, the Machane Yehudah market in Jerusalem. But if you open up the Times of Israel or the Jerusalem Post or Haaretz, any of the English or Ynet maybe, and you'll see kind of two headlines. The one I see now on my iPad from the Times of Israel, Israel still holds world best for vaccination. We're like way ahead of anybody, but we're now amongst the worst for contagion. So we've had over 8,000 people who have tested positive each of the past 2 days. So it's Wednesday night, so Monday and Tuesday. We're probably a similar number that to today, which is up above America and a little bit below the UK on one hand. On the other hand, if you look at the quote league table of where we are leaps and bounds, where I think almost 16% of Israelis, one of every 6 Israeli citizens have been vaccinated in the past 2 weeks, which is absolutely phenomenal. Probably about 65% of those over 60 or with pre-existing medical conditions have already been vaccinated. Everybody I know over 60 has been vaccinated. A number of people in their 50s have been vaccinated as well. So it's really, really good news on the one hand. On the other hand, it's out of control. 1 out of every 1,000 people almost in Israel has contracted corona in the past couple of days, which is a pretty scary statistic. So as of tomorrow night, Thursday, we're going to be going to a very, very, very harsh lockdown. I spoke to our youngest 22-year-old, 2 other kids, 28 and 25, and the youngest is in the Air Force, and he's been hasn't been home for 2 weeks. He's coming home tomorrow night, he said. He's all excited, but he's not excited because of the spike in numbers. He can only be with us at home. He can't visit any of his friends, can't do any socialization outside, any socializing outside of being at home with the family. So we're entering into what we hope is our last of our very, very harsh lockdowns. And hopefully, the hope in Israel, at least, is that by Erev Pesach, we'll be able to sit around the Seder table with grandparents, great-grandparents, and grandchildren, because if we keep going at the pace of 16% of Israelis vaccinated within 2 weeks, within 3 months, we'll have a critical mass of people vaccinated. So that's kind of what's happening on the one hand. On the other hand, the big news, as it might surprise none of you, we're heading to elections on March 23rd. Nobody knows what the result will be. New parties are kind of cropping up like, you can't really say this in Vancouver, like flowers after the rain, because it never stops raining in Vancouver. But here you can say that, like wildflowers after a rain. New parties on an almost hourly basis, people swapping parties here and there. No idea what's going to happen. The only prediction I will make at this point, and we'll be speaking at least 2 more times before the elections, and that is that this is not the end. There will be, make your words for it, another election within 6 months to a year after the elections in March, because it doesn't seem to be that there's going to be a clear winner. But putting all that aside, we're going to go somewhere totally different. And I'll be happy to answer more questions at the end if you've got about Israel-related issues. But I'm going to take you to a place that, and maybe I should do this before I go on to sharing screen. How many of you, just by a show of hands, have been to Israel? Do you have any idea, Rabbi? Is it at least half the people more?
Yeah, I
More or
think,
less.
I mean, I got to look at this group, but this is a sizable number of this group have been to Israel, I think.
Okay. So if you've been to Israel, the odds are you've been to Jerusalem, yes. And the odds are that in Jerusalem, you have been to the Machane Yehudah market. What's amazing about the Machane Yehudah market is that it's not the be-all and end-all of Jerusalem. In other words, when most people come to Israel, their most important destination is Jerusalem, whether it's a person coming with their shul, whether it's a family coming to celebrate Yossi's bar mitzvah or Yocheved's bat mitzvah or whatever, or whether it's a businessman coming for 3 days of work in Tel Aviv, they're going to go to Jerusalem and they're going to go to the old city. But I believe that in order to understand any society, you need to understand what it is that people eat and how they eat it and where they produce, where they purchase the food. And the best place to do that in Israel is the Machane Yehudah market in Jerusalem. Now, I don't live in Jerusalem. I used to go to Jerusalem almost daily when I was guiding. I haven't been guiding in the field since March, of course, but I went a few times in July and August and September, before, kind of after our first lockdown and before our second lockdown, which started Erev Rosh Hashanah, I think on the 18th of September. And so not everybody there was wearing masks, unfortunately, at the time. But about a month after I was there, I too contracted corona, not from the market. I don't know. I have no idea from where, maybe from the supermarket. I don't know. Thankfully, it was a mild case, but the market is actually still open. I'm curious what's going to happen next week when almost everything is closed in Israel except for food stores and pharmacies. But you'll notice by the pictures here that fresh figs on the left-hand side and the pomegranates on the right-hand side, you can more or less understand, even though I told you I was there between July and September, what time of year I was in the shuk, right? You can see the peaches and the nectarines and plums. Israelis still realize, kids still realize that fruit is seasonal. It's not like you can walk into Whole Foods and buy a fresh, quote unquote, fig in January in Vancouver, where there's no way that the figs are growing in January. They might be coming from somewhere in the Southern Hemisphere from a week or so ago. But here, the fruit, not so much the vegetables, the fruit is still seasonal. And I think that's an important element, and you'll see that coming out when we walk through the market. As I said, when people come to Jerusalem, their priority is the old city. You need to understand why Jerusalem is so important to 4 billion people, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. But to really understand the pumping heart of the city, it's not the ancient and the holy sites in the old city, but I think it's the active living part that is the Machane Yehudah market, which really began in the late 19th century, kind of formed into a permanent market in the 1930s under the British, and it formed along Jaffa Road. For those who have been there, it's the road that goes from the Jaffa Gate that most of you probably walk to enter into the old city, that goes to the port of Jaffa, because at that time, that's how people came to Israel, by boat, getting off in Jaffa and spending a 2-day journey going up to Jerusalem. And along that road, new neighborhoods developed in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. And eventually what happened was Arab farmers in villages just beyond the city of Jerusalem would bring their merchandise to sell to the Jewish residents, the growing Jewish residents of the city of Jerusalem, kind of informally. And then through the British Mandate, it became more formalized. And later on, more and more people began to actually buy stalls. And today, as I said, it is probably one of the most diverse market in Israel, and perhaps one of the most diverse food markets anywhere in the world. You get a bit of a sense of the colors. And I really do apologize. I will say that the rabbi and I had many emails. Half of them had to do about a scratch and sniff kind of option for a food tasting tour, but we haven't figured out that technology yet. God willing, we'll get there if we ever happen to have another pandemic. But you'll see the various spices, particularly the, let me get the red thing going over here, particularly the, what is it over here? These are infusions for tea on the left-hand side. You'll see the roasted nuts. You know, when Israelis watch sports matches, they're not having popcorn and pretzels and potato chips. They're having roasted sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds and everything else. And once again, you can see by the pomegranates and the grapes and the figs, this is summertime when I was last at the market. What's happened in recent years was the Machane Yehudah, which was unfortunately in the 90s, even before that, in the 70s, site of all too many terror incidents. In 2000, the Intifada, the second Intifada came, and there were a number of incidents in the market, bombs and other acts of violence. And about 2004, 2005, 500 merchants organized and kind of decided to gentrify Machane Yehudah. Good, bad, we can talk about that a little bit later, but it's really turned into what I call the yappification of Machane Yehudah. On the one hand, it's got many of the old traditional stalls, but on the other hand, it's got a lot of new stalls, number one. Number two, Machane Yehudah now, not now because of Corona, but pre-March of last year, was a very, very hot night spot. So during the day, the stores selling their food would open, and then they close their shutters at night. And then it would turn into a very, very crazy, mad, hopping bar scene with live music and restaurants serving desserts and other sort of, you know, kind of finger food. And an artist, an immigrant from France, Solomon Sousa, put hundreds of these awnings in consultation with the owners of the shop. You can see Golda Meir on the left-hand side, and of course, Ben Gurion upside down. You can get a bit of a sense. Here's a nut store on the left, and inside a store next to them, which is closed or maybe on it, or maybe is their storage, is an image of Ben Gurion. So it's turned into a hot food place during the day and an even hotter place, as I said, at night. Loads of new cuisines, whether it's Ethiopian, Israeli cuisine, a fish and chips restaurant open to immigrants from England. There's a restaurant that the rabbi asked me about called Crave, which is a local boutique brewery that also has burgers. Lots and lots of stuff happening there in the day, not just the food stalls, also a lot of restaurants, but it's also become an international food destination. What's amazing is you see, if you were to Google now, but you're not because you're listening to me, I know, but if you were after my session to Google top food markets in the world, I hate to say this, but Granville Island is not amongst the top 10 or 20, but the Boquera in Barcelona, or the, the Borough Street Market in London, for example. Machane Yehudah is right up there in the top 10 or 12 food markets in the world. It's incredible. And you also now see Israelis coming from Tel Aviv, which is supposed to be the cultural capital of Israel, schlepping up to Jerusalem. Why? To go taste the food inside of Machane Yehudah and to go on one of many, many tasting tours for locals. There are no tasting tours for tourists because there are no tourists in Israel since March. But if you were to go a month ago, pre-lockdown, to the market, you would hear groups of Israelis, small in number because they're limited because of Corona, having tasting tours as they go through the market. The other thing that I think sticks out a lot in the market are the pickled, whether it's pickles and olives. These are miniature eggplants in the foreground. You can see over there all sorts of spice stores. Everybody's got their favorite. There are dozens of stores that sell the exact same stuff. To a new neophyte, it looks like they're all the same, but they are not. Everybody, as I said, has their own favorite. As you see more of Solomon Sousa's images, you can see Ofra Chaza, the late Israeli singer. It looks like Mao Zedong on the right, but it isn't. I don't know who it is. I can't identify everything. This guy on the right-hand side, you'll meet eventually. His name is Uzi Eli. He came as a young boy from Yemen, and he's got a juice stall that sells all sorts of interesting potions and concoctions which will cure you of everything. A couple more slides before we go into the videos, and that is the idea of diversity in the market. Keep in mind the Jews in Jerusalem come from over 70 countries, right? So Jews from Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia, meet Jews from India, meet Jews from Poland. And I don't want to offend anybody because my guess is that most of you are like me, Ashkenazim. And as Ashkenazim, I mean, you know the difference between Ashkenazi and Sephardic cuisine, right? You can give this answer while standing on one foot. If you taste the food and it is boiled or cooked or fried or baked beyond recognition, beyond flavor, then it's definitely Ashkenazi. If, on the other hand, you need a fire extinguisher next to every bite that you eat, it's clearly Sephardic food. And you'll see that expressed by a couple of the people I've asked in the videos in the market. So you got Jews from all over the world. You've got three religions, right? Jews, Arab Muslims, and Arab Christians. And then you have to recognize that Israel is the confluence of three continents. When I go to Vancouver, there's an unbelievable amount of Asian food there. Why? Because there's a very significant Asian population in Vancouver. But in Israel, you've got for millennia, right? The Romans would import spices from Asia across Israel, Palestine, all the way to Rome. And you still have that meeting and that influence of this confluence of these three countries, all right? The question oftentimes that people ask is, all right, so who invented it? Did Israel invent hummus or did Lebanon invent hummus? Did the Egyptians invent falafel or did the Israelis invent falafel? And whose falafel is better? That's a totally different question. But if you were to go to a restaurant, a Middle Eastern restaurant in Vancouver, the odds are that most Middle Eastern restaurants there are not Jewish/Israeli, but are from other parts of the Middle East. And if you go and ask for chatzilim, they'll look at you and they'll say, what are you talking about? If, on the other hand, you ask for baba ganoush, which is Arabic for chatzilim or eggplant, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. It's the same dish. It's expressed in different languages, of course, and they all show a significance of one culture's influence on the other. And as I said, it's almost impossible to figure out where the food originates from. This is the classics, the vegetables on the right-hand side, lots of dried fruits, of course, as we approach Tu B'Shvat. This guy, I'm not sure who he is. He could be the Messiah because he's sitting on a white donkey. I don't know. The image of the temple rebuilt. This is all the same artist. That's incredible. He's got hundreds of these stalls painted around Jerusalem. He's done a lot of other street art throughout the country. The last bit before I go deep into the videos is, you know, when you used to come to Israel, I'd say I moved here 32 years ago. I'd say 25, 30 years ago. You know, you came hungry you came full to Israel and you left hungry, right? I mean, you'd have a falafel and you might have a schnitzel and a steak. I don't eat red meat, but a steak was, you know, something of a Charlie Chaplin movie, right? There wasn't a lot of depth and breadth and good flavor to Israeli cuisine. That has changed a lot. And if you go to many places, whether it's Michael Salomonov's Zahav restaurant in Philadelphia, or you can go to restaurants, and I forget its name now, in Leicester Square in London. It's closed, but the restaurant of the chef Asaf Granit from Machane Yehudah in Jerusalem. Israelis are opening restaurants all over the world, but there's no question that Jerusalem cuisine has probably in recent years got its biggest push from the Israeli Yotam Ottolenghi and his friend and partner in crime, Sami Tamimi, Israeli-Palestinian, living in London. And in this, of one of many books that Ottolenghi has put out called Jerusalem, in his introduction, he says quite simply that Jerusalem is this crazy mix of people. And as he says, residents of utter diversity, that it puts the old Tower of Babel, the old Tower of Babylon, to shame. And who it belongs to, as I mentioned earlier before, Tamimi and Ottolenghi also have that big question as well. Is there any Jerusalem cuisine? Probably not. It's this intricate, convoluted mosaic of peoples and their cuisine. And of course, this inherent origin and passion and energy the Jerusalemites have in abundance that results in some fantastic food and culinary creativity. And that, in a nutshell, I think, is the background that I want you to have before we go deep into the Machane Yehudah market. 2 more slides before the first video. Notice the dates. Dates are harvested here, end of August really to about mid-October. Watermelon, a very summer fruit. So again, I was in that meeting time between the end of summer and the beginning of fall. These chalot can give you a sense maybe that I was there just before Rosh Hashanah, the round chalot of Rosh Hashanah. And of course, the last of the summer fruits. Now, I went there a few times. I got to press pause here. I went there a few times with some friends of my daughter to take some videos. It's me, it's my phone. So they're not, they're not Hollywood videos. If you want to nominate one for a prize, don't. But they're videos of me meeting people, kind of giving you a bit of a sense and a bit of a flavor, visually at least, and auditorially, without getting the actual taste, but you're going to be hungry after this, so hopefully you have some lunch. We're going to start with one that is kind of this introduction and this overview. As I say, A, not everybody's wearing masks, so be warned, and B, but doesn't matter. You're less than 2 meters away from, you're more than 2 meters away from them, and B, there's a lot of background noise because it's a market. So without further ado, welcome to Machane Yehudah.
Amazing. The sights, the smells, the sounds. It's a little bit chaotic here. Of course, the newest thing are the masks that on sale, that not quite indigenous and typical. So I know it looks a little bit crowded. It smells unbelievable, but I suggest at this point you guys follow me into the shuk and let's see what awaits us. Come. Roasted nuts, and of course specialty, a little bit of sugar added I might add, but specialty teas for hot and for cold. What I love most about the shuk is the diversity of fruits and vegetables. Notice the grapes, red grapes, purple grapes, green grapes, guayabas, and figs. Right about now, just before Sukkot, they're harvested and people are buying. Almost everything here is produced locally, and that's what makes this one of the top markets in the world, because like many Western countries, they're trying to find food that is, farm to table, but here almost everything you see around you is farm to table. Look at the luscious tropical fruits over here. The first dates, the yellow dates are in, the pomegranates are ready as we speak. My daughter just noticed that the persimmons are ready. The sabra fruit up on the top over there, the indigenous cactus from here. You see the lychees.
So somebody, by the way, put up that they can't see the video, but other people responded that they can't see it. So whoever has it, there to thank you, Rabbi. Again, the sense of diversity is one of the major themes. The other one is the seasonality of everything. I think is a very important thing to recall. When I first moved here 32 years ago, I remember that my wife and I, Michelle, we lived in Jerusalem 2 years after we made Aliyah, and we would go every Friday. With my with my mountain equipment co-op bicycle and my helmet, and we would ride into Jerusalem and we'd lock our bikes, and everyone looked at us because we were wearing helmets and B, we were wearing biking tights. Like, who are these people? And we'd do our shopping there, pre-kids, and we could put it on our bike and drive home. And back then, it was very different than the market is today for a couple of reasons. One is that you didn't have this kind of post-2004, 2005 gentrification of the market. And two, the market had really slowed down in terms of who was going to the market, because what had happened in Jerusalem, the city that grew particularly after 1967, that physically spread out, supermarkets only came to Israel really in the 1960s and 70s. And people realized, why would I schlep like these two crazy young immigrants on their bicycles on the hot Jerusalem day up and down hills to carry all this heavy stuff home with them, when you can go to the supermarket, go on a bus, park your car, whatever, and buy everything and put it in your cart and take it home. And so the market kind of began to lose its popularity, all markets in the country, for that reason as well. And I should remind you that up until the 70s, pretty much, everybody did their shopping in big cities in markets, and they had a little makola, a little grocery store where you can get, bread and eggs and a few other things throughout the week. If you go into an Israeli kitchen, which hopefully you don't want to see that again, if you go into an Israeli kitchen, you will find a lot more raw ingredients and a lot more raw food is prepared than I think typically in North America. I like to say American, but I grew up in Vancouver. There was a lot more kind of a healthy cuisine, at least that I was exposed to, than I know many Americans, my wife included, were exposed to. But spices are an essential ingredient in one's home. I know we went up to my mother-in-law. She's 83 in Jerusalem today. She had an issue with her hot water, so we had to go there before the closure. And my wife said, I'll make my mother a vegetable soup. And she says, do you think she has any spices? I said, no. And sure enough, my wife put the spices in a little bag, mixed it all together, and she brought it with her to add to the spice. Because an 83-year-old immigrant from America doesn't have the spices that an 83-year-old woman who's lived here for 83 years would probably have in her kitchen. So I want you to understand the foundation of the spices in all of our kitchens to a guy I've been buying spices from for years, Mordechai, the spice seller at Pereg Spices. But you don't want that one, you want to go back down. So why it's not playing? Okay.
I'm here in my favorite spice store. My old friend Mordechai. There's Mordechai. Mordechai, how's it going? Hollander, Mordechai? Baruch Hashem. With this abundance of prepared ingredients that one adds to make majadra, rice and lentils, I just tasted spice mix to add to rice, and of course the best, I think, and it's a totally subjective statement, the best collection of spices in Israel. This is Pereg. Pereg is a national chain of spice stores. You can see their prepackaged spices, all sorts of interesting things for sale over here. People from all different backgrounds come to buy their spices.
Because the mix of the Oriental people and West people from Europe, as we have a lot of the spices. You see here all of these spices. In Israel, a very famous cumin, turmeric, paprika, black pepper, white pepper, and the mix of the a lot of the spices from, for example, Hawaii. Hawaii is this Hawaii. This the source from the Yemen. From Yemen.
And what do Yemenites use Hawaii for?
Yeah, for everything. For children, for soup. This is the mix of cumin, turmeric, cloves, cardamom. Yes, and we have, for example, the mix of spices for fish in the oven or in the barbecue. This mix of a lot of spices. This is Indian spice.
So what would you say is the greatest influence in terms of which country in terms of the spices? Is there one, or is it Morocco, Tunisia?
We bring a lot of my spices from the India, Turkey, yes, and Thailand, China.
My favorite spice is also referred to as Garam Masala or Ras Al Khanut. Ras Al Khanut, I understand, and that's from Morocco. And Garam Masala, Indian. How many Ashkenazi grandmothers come in here to buy their spices? More Mizrahim Sephardim or more?
Yes, more Mizrahim.
Yeah. Are you saying that Ashkenazim don't use spice?
Ashkenazi, they start to use spices.
Salt and pepper, mostly, right?
Yes.
Mordechai, thank you. I bumped into Dvora, originally from Morocco, and I asked her what the difference is between Mizrahi or Sephardic kitchen and cooking, and between the Ashkenazi tradition. So please.
באשכנזי, בשולחן של שבת במטבח המרוקאי יש 18 סלטים. ומעלה.
In the Moroccan Friday night dinner table, there are at least 18 salads.
זה חי סלטים.
These are chai salatim. That's of course chai the number 18 mystically.
יש סלט חי אחד.
Whereas in the Ashkenazi tradition, there is one chai, one live or one raw salad. Maud?
וואו, יש הבדל עצום, התבלינים, הריחות.
Said the spices, the scents, it's a totally different kitchen. Did any of your children marry any Ashkenazim? יש ילדים שלך שהתחתנו עם אשכנזים? No. So אין לך את הבעיה הזאת.
יש לי ילד אחד שהוא נשוי לאשכנזיה לא בארץ, בקנדה, אבל הוא בעצמו שף.
So she has one son who's married to a Ashkenazi woman in Canada.
So first of all, you can't make this stuff up. This woman, Dvora, I literally bumped into as I was interviewing Mordechai. I bumped into Dvoras as I was interviewing Mordechai, and she told me her story. And it turns out that she says, yes, I have a son. I said, we're in Canada. She says, we're in Vancouver. I said, seriously? But the funny part was that she forgot that one of her Moroccan ancestry children married an Ashkenazi, which is fascinating. I will say that 32 years in Israel, I'm from Vancouver, my wife Michelle is from New York. Our kids are all Sabras, they're all born here. Our eldest son is married a year and a half now almost, and his wife, family named Cohen. One side Holocaust survivors from Poland, the other exiles from Spain in the 15th century, so they have more kind of Sephardic cuisine, except in my daughter-in-law's house, it's the Polish side of the family that is pretty dominant in the cuisine. And my kids all kind of make fun of us that, our food is not what it should be. So when they turned 13, their bar mitzvah year in school, bar mitzvah year, they had a family roots project, and each kid had to choose what traditional family dish they wanted to bring to share. So, it's a Moroccan dish, and Yemenite dish, and from the Caucasus region in the former Soviet Union, amazing stuff, Moroccan, spicy, Egyptian. And then what did my son ask his mother to make? Chocolate chip cookies. So, that's the kind of North American cuisine. One of the most important parts of food here, and I apologize to those of you who are allergic to it, is sesame. Sesame, tahina, has kind of made a renaissance in Israel today. It's used in a number of dishes, tahina itself, but of course it's very important in hummus, very important in falafel, very important in my favorite dish, and filled with lots of protein, and that is chalva. When I was a kid growing up, going to Talmud Torah in Vancouver, my snack at lunch was those sesame snaps, to give me a little bit of protein. It would have a little bit of, maybe just a little sugar or a lot of honey or whatever that encouraged me to eat it, but it was healthy and it was filled with protein. Today, chalva has made a real renaissance, and you can see a number of stores selling multiple types of chalva, as you'll see in the show.
One of the most important ingredients in food in that part of the world is sesame. I'm sorry if any of you are allergic to sesame, but sesame is really important in two major foods. One, tahina, three actually, tahina, chalva, and of course, falafel. Come on inside. You'll notice this old mill is taking organic Ethiopian sesame seed, crushing it. אהלן, מה שלומך, בעל הבית? איך קוראים לך? בוא. איך קוראים לך? ליאור, נעים מאוד, אני מייק. שלום, אתה עובד פה? אתה יכול להסביר לי קצת על איך אתם מייצרים את הטחינה הנהדר? I asked him, Lior, how they make this tahina. The best, they claim, the best sumsum, the best sesame in the world from Ethiopia. This is a Syrian millstone. שום נעים מאוד מייק. אז שום, תסביר לי, מהרגע שאתם מייבאים את הסומסום מאתיופיה, שמים את זה פה לרחיים ומה הלאה? ככה זה? זה הכל. מה מוסיפים לזה? I asked them what they add to it to make it so good. Nothing. Only organic Ethiopian sesame. If it's just sesame and just tahina, what are all these things doing over here? Flavored tahina. Flavored. What's your favorite flavor? What's your favorite? Chocolate. Can we taste some of the chocolate? Now, I'm warning you. Chocolate and chili don't go well together, but we'll give it a try. Is that chocolate? This is chocolate. Take my word for it. What else? Pesto. All right. I'm willing to try the pesto. I'm going out on a limb for you. Shall we come with the pesto? Yes, תודה. It's interesting. Trust me, tahina, very important ingredient, and we used to just buy it in the supermarket, but now there's an abundance of tahina shops that are making their own organic tahina, sometimes adding different flavors. You can see there are dozens of different flavors used for desserts, used for cooking all sorts of dishes in the kitchen, and tahina, keep in mind, is nature's most powerful protein. A little seed goes a long way. Come and taste the tahina.
Yes, by the way, Otto Lengi's recipe for tahina, very easy. Add a little bit of water to your organic Ethiopian, ideally sesame paste, your tahina, a little bit of lemon, a little bit of salt if you want, and some raw garlic, and that is a full protein poured on a salad. I'm not advertising Otto Lengi's book, but trust me, it is definitely a way to go.
One of the most important.
Dan asked a question in terms of Mordechai and the spices. The truth is that the spices at Pereg are not mixed there specifically. They are at the they're mixed at the factory, which is, again, it's a national chain, and then they give them to the different branches of them. There aren't anybody. They're roasted nut places that roast their own nuts live. I mean, fresh on the site, but many of these places they might get the raw ingredients and mix, the different fish sauce. But the bigger ones, like the Hawaj that you saw, the Yemenite spices, pretty much mixed in the factory and then sent in smaller portions to the store. One of the things about Israel was that you basically, up until 30 years ago, two choices. You want meat, it can either be turkey or it can be turkey, more or less. Seriously. I mean, if you go to the supermarket and you buy pastrami or salami or hot dogs, much more of that is turkey than red meat, than beef. But it used to be really only two types of coffee and two types of cheese and two types of bread. As you will see in the next couple of videos, we've changed a lot in recent years.
For those of you who've been to Israel, you know there are always two types of coffee in Israel. There was what's called bots, or Turkish coffee, or black coffee, which is very finely ground. Put it in boiling water, and then you let the brown sediment sink to the bottom. And make sure that you drink the upper part of the coffee, but you don't chew the mud in the lower part of the coffee. Turkish coffee, Armenian coffee, black coffee, it's all the same. The other coffee was called Nes. Now some people say it's called Nes because it was from Nestle's, Nescafe. Others say it was Nes for the Hebrew word miracle, because it was this miraculous little granulated powder you'd put inside hot water and it would turn into this drink. I think it was called Nes merely because it was a miracle that anybody agreed to drink it. Thankfully today in Israel there are many, many roasteries who roast their own coffee beans and they blend their own blends together. And here you can see, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4 places right after each other, 3 of which are coffee, 1 of which is a bar. Here you can get your own beans from all across the world. Here there's another roaster. You can see, in the back over here, they're roasting their own beans. They've got a small little roaster over there. And my favorite, because with all food, it's all subjective, everybody has their own favorite, is roasters. Up here on the corner, I discovered a few years ago that this, perhaps the best coffee in Jerusalem. The young man who owns the business here, and you can see in the far corner, there's another small little roaster that one can now have coffee that is not just either black mud Turkish coffee or miracle coffee, but actually really, really good roasted coffee. And unfortunately, even with modern technology, I can't transfer the beautiful smell and the scent of the coffee beans roasting as we speak inside of roasters. When you come to Jerusalem, you choose who makes your favorite coffee.
A couple of years ago, we did some renovation work at home, and my 20-year-old son is an independent contractor.
Mike, you've frozen on us. I'm sure you didn't do it on purpose. Is anybody seeing or hearing Mike? I guess he'll come back in a moment. It's delicious, isn't it? As we're waiting for Mike to reconnect or rejoin us, any questions that maybe I can answer about Machane Yehudah, if you something piqued your interest from the video? So I will tell you that the last time we were in Israel, well, maybe it was since the last time, but which was now, Mike will probably come back in soon. There's also incredible restaurants in Machane Yehudah. I mean, we think of it as a market with its stalls of, hummus and vegetables and fruits and spices and all those things, but there's also a whole eating scene, and I'm sure Mike will talk more about that. For our kids who, we keep kosher, there's a couple of items that we've never really been able to eat and out. And there was this one place called Hatch, which has the most incredible wings. Now, we haven't had a lot of wings out, so it could not, they're not so incredible wings, but they kind of blew our mind. And it's these Orthodox guys that are making Korean barbecue sandwiches and kosher wings, and it's and there's all manner of foods. And at nighttime, as I think Mike will talk also, at nighttime it becomes a real club scene and a party scene. And so many of the coffee shops turn into bars. the food stalls, or I should say the fruit and vegetable type stalls, close, and everybody sets out tables. All pre-COVID, sets out tables into the walkway area, and the place is hopping. Every night of the week, but particularly Motzi Shabbos, particularly Saturday evening, where it's there's, I won't say there's dancing, but there's live music in some of these places, and it's again pre-COVID, really packed to the rim with people. The other thing not to be missed is Machane Yehudah on Friday afternoon, just before Shabbos. Most of the owners of the shops are religious Jews, and so they'll shut down before Shabbat. But many of their patrons, Machane Yehudah sits just adjacent to the Orthodox neighborhood of Mea Shearim, and other Orthodox neighborhoods now that have popped up around there. And so that's their market. That's their, that's their Save On Foods that they go to. And so on Friday, all day long, and particularly into the early afternoon, it is packed with people that are shopping for Shabbos. And it's really the heartbeat of Israel. And you see flowers being sold, and you see chalot being bought. And it's incredible to see everybody preparing their Shabbos meals. So hopefully Mike will come back soon. I'll try to WhatsApp him while I'm doing this. Any questions from anybody? You need to unmute yourself if you want to ask one.
Did anybody get the name of the mural artist? I missed it.
I don't remember the name of it. When Mike comes back on.
Okay.
I don't see Mike on here. I'm sure Mike will come back soon. Wait, maybe that's him. Yeah, here we are. Mike's rejoining us just now.
Hello.
You're back. I thought Israel was a high-tech country. You lose your internet.
I have done 70 different presentations, and I have never had this happen to me. And I said to my wife downstairs, "What's going on?" She says, "I don't know. The TV just went off as well." So I tried to go on Wi-Fi via our neighbors, which didn't work. And then I plugged right into Anyway, we're at the coffee. That was what was going on. So we saw the coffee one, right, guys?
Yep.
Now what's happening here? Good. And then we'll go to the next one. So I don't know if you heard the whole story. So these guys didn't understand what all this kind of high-tech Israeli fashion coffee is. But again, you can go to a hotel and make the mistake of ordering their regular drip coffee, which is really bad. Or you can order a fuch, a cafe au lait, or a cappuccino, or an espresso. And really, there's been a massive coffee revolution. So sorry for the lighting. I'm going to put the next video on, and hopefully I can work and get a little bit better lighting in my room. Here we go.
So this is Basher cheese. Just like two types of coffee, there used to be two types of cheese in Israel. There was soft cheese, white cheese, and a hard cheese or yellow cheese. Today, thanks largely to Basher, who boasts that they sell over 1,000 kosher cheeses from all over the world in the store, from aged Parmesan Regio to contemporary soft Israeli cheeses, 1,000 cheeses. And again, they've changed how we look at food in Israel from being food as something that one consumes because you need to consume it, to something where people have traveled all over the world to Spain and to Italy and to France and to England, and they want a cheddar, or they want a Gloucester, or they want an Edam, or they want a Parmesan Regio, and they come here and they can get the top cheeses in the world. So again, changing the paradigm from being subsistence to being people with means and people who are able to choose what type of cheese they want, not just, as most Israelis grew up knowing, it's either yellow cheese, the hard type, or white cheese, the soft type.
Some people think this is the land of cheeses, but that's more for my Christian pilgrim tours. But the truth of the matter, as I say, from two cheeses to many cheeses. My son, again, I said, who's coming home tomorrow, says, anything you want? He said, yeah, did you say you got a Gouda with camine, truffle oil? I said, yeah. He says, how about getting that? You couldn't get that 30 years ago. You can get yellow cheese, as I said, or white cheese. When I was there, September was just before Rosh Hashanah, and as I said, harvest time for the pomegranates, harvest time for the dates. So it's a bit dated. It's about five months ago, but it's very seasonal. And just before Rosh Hashanah, and as you said at the beginning, Rabbi Dan, we're starting a new non-Jewish year, but we're starting 2021. So hopefully our thoughts of what we think as we head into Rosh Hashanah and that Tishrei holidays, we can think as we head into 2021 as well.
Here we are, Shuk Machane Yehudah. 8 days before Rosh Hashanah begins. Typically the market would be much, much busier. Lena singing or playing on a saxophone an old Yemenite High Holidays tune. And unfortunately, as I said, it's not nearly as crowded as it typically is, but we'll go and see some of the action and see how the prices, you might notice, on the fruits and vegetables are written on chalk, written with the magic marker, and they're erased. Because towards the end of the day, shopkeepers want to get rid of everything. Everyone buys from their own favorite shopkeeper. They go to the same place for generation after generation and generation. And as you can see, pretty much everything here is locally produced. Avocados are starting to come in. You see the melons, kind of the last, the little pumpkins over there. And of course, my personal favorite mangoes. The last, I think, of the Maya, our favorite brand of mangoes. In Deuteronomy, there are 7 species, natural indigenous fruits and grains in the land of the Bible, one of which is pomegranate. And what's amazing, of course, is that now, just as we approach the high holiday season and we get to the last of the holidays, the festival of Sukkot, it's the time that the figs and the dates and the olives and the pomegranates are ripe. And what I've ordered now is a fresh squeezed pomegranate juice. We know, again, farm to table, these pomegranates were probably harvested in the last week at the most. And you're going to see what is perhaps the best with its antioxidant properties. Shana Tova, Happy New Year. By the time you see this, it'll already be next year, but Happy New Year, Chag Sameach, because we're right during the time of Sukkot. And finally, Shechianu v'kimanu v'gianu l'zman hazeh. Thank you, God, for bringing us to this time where it's actually time to appreciate the beautiful harvest of the pomegranates. Wow. We're here at the entrance to the Shuk on Jaffa Road. See a light rapid train maybe coming by. Lots and lots of popcorn, but we're also at the spot where the magic happens. My favorite roasted nut and dried fruit salesman has got some new medjool dates from the Arava, from the southern region of Israel. More moist at 58 shekels, a bit drier at 68 shekels. And I don't know if you notice on the sign, but it says in Hebrew under the price, Shechianu. Shechianu v'kimanu v'gianu l'zman hazeh, because this is the first of the harvest, just before Rosh Hashanah, just at the time of the high holidays, 2020, the first day. So I asked my friend Shai which one. He said, take the middle one, sweeter, but it's got to be in the freezer. I'm going to go for the one on the right-hand side. Gently take one. Excuse me. The problem, of course, is that I have to take my mask off, sorry. But I'm going to taste one of the first dates, the first harvest of Israel. If you've never had a medjool date, particularly one that was picked within a week off of the tree, then you don't know what you're missing. This is perhaps the best date I've had. It is the best date I've had in about 11 months since last year's harvest. Shechianu v'kimanu v'gianu l'zman hazeh. May it be a good, sweet year for everybody watching this, and hopefully we'll all be able to taste fresh dates in Israel in the not too distant future.
I had to screen that over with my wife, first of all, because I made a reference to having the first date of the season. The good news about dates, in contrast to figs, is that dates can actually be stored for a long time. So if you buy a date anywhere, anytime, the odds that you're buying is a date that was picked in the previous, at least in the northern hemisphere, in the previous end of, as I said, end of September, kind of end of August to end of September period. They're not as good when they come as when they come off of the trees, but keep them in your fridge, keep them in your freezer. Figs, on the other hand, don't last long. Figs, in fact, whenever I'm in the shuk and I buy figs in July, August, September, whenever it is, and I get the figs and I'm all excited and I take them home, and basically you have to put them with ice cream or you have to bake with them because they get very mushy very, very quickly. And the figs that most people grew up on, me included, was something in the middle of 2 pieces of a cookie called a fig Newton, or something imported in a long line, round and dried with probably a little bit of sugar added of dried figs. Now, there are lots of restaurants around the market as well. And for many years, there were very simple restaurants, kind of workers, very inexpensive restaurant. One of the more famous ones is this one called Azura. You'll hear the story by the owner, who's the son of the original founder of Azura. Very, very popular, slow cooking. They used to have one small little store, and now they've got 2 branches right opposite each other inside Machane Yehudah. Oh, and before I start, there's a, as you enter the restaurant, there's a poem in Hebrew, which I've translated on the left by one of the Banai families. The Banai family is perhaps the most famous group of singers, or family of singers, from the youngest Eviatar Banai, who's very popular in Israel today, to his uncle or cousin Yehudah Banai. And they grew up in the Shuk on a street that was called Agas, or the Pear Street, and now it's called Banai Street. It's about 12 stores long, about 100, 200 feet long. But it's amazing because in the poem, he describes coming up to Jerusalem. He says, the bottom, he says, I returned for a moment as he smelled the smell of the potatoes and the rice and the patties and spinach coming from the restaurant. I returned for a moment to my mother, and because she is from who I come from and to whom I am never stopped walking. It's very, very powerful poem that is meet you at the entrance to the market, to the store.
Welcome to Azura, a very, very famous family eatery in Machane Yehudah. We've got some great hummus with Tahina, fresh hummus paste. We've got some two types, one of the same type, actually I should say, of kube with beets. One of the quintessential Israeli foods, of course, is hummus. I say that, but I'm not really sure that hummus is classically Israeli, but it's come to be known as hummus. And the way one eats hummus is by taking a pita and literally dipping the hummus, the pita, in the hummus and putting it in your mouth. Wow. It's been 6 months since I sat in a restaurant and was able to literally dip in the hummus. You can buy the hummus in the supermarket, but it's not the same thing. Classic hummus, freshly ground chickpeas that they soak in water overnight, mixed with spice, added with tahina, added with parsley. There's nothing like hummus. And Azura, the restaurant in Jerusalem, Machane Yehudah, is possibly one of the best hummus joints in town. So we're sitting here at Azura restaurant, one of the favorites of people in Machane Yehudah. And Azura specialized in kube. Kube, for those of you who are not from the Middle East, particularly from Kurdistan, are not familiar with this semolina in which is placed meat. Make the meat patty, cook it inside the semolina, and then as you can see, it's mixed with garlic and with onions, of course, and with peas. Very, very healthy. Very typical for Jews from Kurdistan or northern Iraq. Friday afternoon, just before Shabbat, to dig into their kuba. And of course, every family has its different tradition of what type of kuba. The one I like is the sweet one with the beets, but many other people like a sweet and sour one, which is much more lemony. See you soon.
Hi. My name is Shabi. I'm from Azura restaurant in Jerusalem, Machane Yehudah market. Azura is my father. It's nickname Ezra. Azura is come from east of Turkish. In 52 here to the market. It's open small restaurant with a 2 table. Now it's very, very big with 2 parts of the restaurant, and we cook here slow food. From Turkish, Kurdish, and Syrian food, and Iraqi stuff here. It's very authentic and very famous in this area in the country. And we hope to see you here soon after the Corona.
Inshallah. Shabi, tell us a little bit about kube. What is kube? What type of kube do you have?
We have 5 kind of kube. One is Kurdish, one is Turkish, one is Syrian, one Iraqi, and one is Iranian. It's semolina stuffed meat with 5-6 kind of soup. The beet kube, the mangold kube, the okra kube, and the spicy kube.
And which is your favorite if you had to choose one?
I don't eat kube because I'm very allergic to gluten, but I think it's very, very tasty. Every kube you taste is the same taste, but it's very, very tasty.
And who works in the restaurant?
It's working from the east of Jerusalem and west of Jerusalem.
It's a second generation family restaurant?
Second generation.
And how has Corona, of course, affected business?
It's affected the business, but we hope to see the tourists again. And everything it's come before.
And do you do any delivery?
I make delivery. Not to the States, not to Europe, not yet, but here it's very small in the neighborhood.
Okay, and if I were to ask you as someone who's, as you can tell by my accent, Ashkenazi, originally from Canada, what's the biggest difference between Ashkenazi food and so-called Mizrahi, Sephardi?
The Ashkenazi food is without spices, the Mizrahi food it's with spices, it's spicy with a lot of garlic, a lot of onion. The Ashkenazi food it's very anemic.
That's a beautiful description. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
So I hope none of you are offended if you were told by Shabi that your food is anemic, but that's at least the perception of the Ashkenazi food in contrast to the Sephardi food. I talked about 2 types of cheese. I talked about 2 types of coffee. You can also say the same about Israeli beer. There used to be 2 types of Israeli beer. Now there are many of them. My 2 boys both as a hobby make their own beer, which is something one can do a little bit easier these days. But they don't really need to because there's some really, really good Israeli beer.
We're standing here in the Beer Bazaar, one of my favorite places to go. It's a little bit quiet because we're in the middle of the day, but the Beer Bazaar here sells only Israeli beers. Now, if you came to Israel 20 years ago, there were 2 types of beers. There was Gold Star and Maccabi. Gold Star is kind of okay, a bit of a lager. Maccabi, kind of like some light American beers. But now there are dozens and dozens of micro breweries making beer all throughout Israel, and become a little bit closer, you can see some of my favorites. Whether it's Malka, whether it's Negev from the south, whether it's a couple local Jerusalem breweries. And unfortunately, we're here during the middle of the day, but take my word for it, if we were to come back here at 11, 12 o'clock at night, there would not be a square meter for anybody to sit in, because the place would be packed with hundreds and hundreds of Israelis who want to drink fresh, good, crisp Israeli boutique beers.
So there's 2 of my favorite, Herzl IPA on the left, and then a Malka on the right. Malka is every year at Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israeli Independence Day, they come up with this limited edition of beers where they put images of former prime ministers. So you see Ben Gurion on the pale ale on the right-hand side. You see Golda, yes, that's Golda smoking a cigarette with the blonde ale in the middle. And then you see Menachem Begin with the hoppy wheat. Now, my favorite Israeli beer is an IPA, Indian Pale Ale. And a few years ago, Yom Ha'atzmaut, they put out these 3 beers. There was another one with Theodore Herzl, and then they had another one with Gandhi, as in Mohandas Gandhi, on the image of the IPA. Somebody from the Indian embassy in Tel Aviv saw that and was not too happy, didn't like it, and so they protested to Malka, and they took the IPA, the image of Gandhi off. So Yom Ha'atzmaut, there's no image on the IPA, but it's still a good beer. It's not necessarily about the image. 2 more videos, one about this guy, Uzi Eli. I saw his picture on the image of Solomon Sousa. Somebody asked me a question of what are the best dishes and easiest dishes from Otto Lengi's cookbook. I'll leave that after this video. In the next video, I'll answer that. So remind me to ask me that question once again. Eli is definitely one of the more colorful figures in the market. And I should say that his juice store,
Fortuitous timing.
His juice store is famous in the market, and he's opened up a branch in the Tel Aviv Carmel market. We see this in a number of places. The guy that has the chalva and the Tahina store, there's a cheese guy, Basher Cheese. They've all opened branches in other places, starting in the Machane Yehudah market in Jerusalem.
Here we are in front of Ish Etrogim, the Etrog man, Uzi Eli. Young boy comes here from Yemen who created this concept of using nature to try to better the human condition, if that's one way to describe it. There's Uzi. He's motioning me to come in. So here we are in Eli's juice empire. It's not really juice, as I said. Eli uses nature to improve the human condition. Eli.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I born in Yemen 77 years ago. It's tradition from my grandfather, mother, father. We learn from the Rambam Maimonides how to be healthy from the nature. We use the etrog for skin magic. Give me your hand, It renews the skin in 20 seconds. It has to be for the face, for acne problem, for a good breath, and you become become young and healthy in 27 years.
You came from Yemen, and a long line of family traditions based on the teachings of the Rambam, who was a doctor.
Yeah, philosopher and rabbi.
A great rabbi and a doctor.
Yeah.
And he inspired your family in the tradition of using nature to improve the human ailment.
Right, right. And we make soap, we make beverage, we make liquor, we make from the etrog we make all kind of variety of medicine. You can see skin magic is for against the wrinkles, for sinus and pain in the body.
All of this is made out of the etrog.
Yes, yes.
So for people who are about to celebrate Sukkot, what do they do with their etrog at the end? Do they sell them? They bring them to you?
They bring it to me, and we make it jam. Yeah, I mean for
make a jam out of the Most of you watching this are probably not originally from Yemen, but people from Yemen are very connected to something that grows naturally called gat. Tell us a little bit about gat.
Gat is the leaves. They chew it in their mouth, and they wake him up, make him healthy, happy, and concentrated. So this gat import from Ethiopia to Israel. This one grow in Israel locally.
And it's a legal substance. You can.
In Israel, it's legal to chew it.
It's like caffeine. It kind of sharpens your senses.
Yes, similar to caffeine.
Okay.
It's for amphetamine to open the mind.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the juices that are out here. My favorite, one of my favorite stops in the shuk.
Okay.
Are all of these.
This way, citrus, etrog, and gut. It's for wake you up and for health. This one.
Etrog gut.
Etrog gut.
Yeah.
And grapefruit.
My personal favorite, I have to admit, is the passion fruit and organic goat yogurt.
This one, yeah. All nature, no sugar.
I feel it already. So all of these are natural, no sugar whatsoever. What's the best seller?
This one.
Any recipe for Corona? During the time of Corona, what special concoction? If you invented something new, something different?
It's a cayenne pepper, 1 drop in a glass of water. It stops the Corona problem.
Pepper. Here it is.
I use it for anti-Corona.
But you just created this for Corona, or was something beforehand?
No, it's before you take regular water, 1 drop, morning and evening. It's tested. It's for anti-Corona, antivirus. It's clean the throat.
Wow. It clears the throat. You feel the pepper in the throat.
Yeah.
I had the goat, which kind of wakes me up a little bit. I had the etrog gut, which wakes me up even more. And now I got that canned pepper. So basically, after about 5 minutes with Uzi Eli, although you can't come to Israel yourself, we're willing to ship it to you. You will be healed of any ailment that you have or any ailment that you might have in the future.
נכון מאוד, thank you.
ברכה לראש השנה, אלי.
שנה טובה ומבורכת, happiness and united, and become to Israel to see our new future. שנה טובה.
I do want to say that I had 1 drop of that, and then a month later I got Corona. So I don't want this to be an endorsement of this, cayenne pepper, but it's amazing the stuff that they sell, relaxing, and it's become very popular, not just in the Machane Yehudah style, but as I said, in Tel Aviv. And I don't know if he's open anywhere else in Jerusalem, but he's a real colorful guy. He's all over television as well. And it's amazing because it's the Rambam, right? Maimonides, and using nature to, as I said in the video, to kind of make us feel a little bit better. The last video, and then I'll turn over to Q&A, is perhaps the most famous stop in the market, called Marzipan Bakery. It doesn't sell any marzipan. You'll see it sells Rugelach. It sells a lot of things, but it doesn't sell any marzipan, as you'll see in the video.
One of the icons of the shuk is Marzipan Bakery. Now, the funny thing about Marzipan Bakery is, for those foodies out there, the marzipan is made out of almond paste. There's no almonds and there's no paste here. It is just the name of the bakery. And it's world-renowned because they make perhaps the world's best Rugelach, chocolate or cinnamon. Come on inside. But if you come here on a Friday, pre-Corona, of course, there'd be a line around the block for people to get fresh marzipan baked chocolate and cinnamon Rugelach. Today, they don't even ask people individually. They automatically put them in a half kilo, probably about a pound box. And people take them out of the stores like literally hotcakes. And perhaps that term hotcakes was coined here in Marzipan because when they come out, they're hot. And people love eating them as they're literally dripping and gooing and gushing with just a little bit of sugar, just a little bit of flour, just a little bit of chocolate, making, as I said, perhaps, we got so many croissants, perhaps the world's best Rugelach. It doesn't show his face because he's a secret. It's a secret who Itzik is, and it's a secret what he puts in his Rugelach. Nachon? Nachon meod. Nachon. So Itzik, show us where you make, where the magic happens. This is crazy. Hundreds of times I've been here, but I've never had the opportunity of going with Itzik into the inner sanctum of Marzipan Bakery. Now, I know some of you may be bakers, amateur conditors, but the odds of you having an oven like this at home are pretty small. This is the major oven, which is parv. As you can see, it's non-dairy, and then the one on the left-hand side is dairy for burekas, and this is where the magic happens of the Rugelach. As I said earlier, chocolate and cinnamon Rugelach, perhaps the best in the world. In a minute, we're going to meet Itzik, the manager of this one of, but perhaps the most famous of the branches of Marzipan. Anonymous, because he's actually worried that if people see his face, he said he's agreed to it. For me, he's agreed to it. But this is Itzik. I've known him for kama shanim ata kvar menel et hasnif? He's only been managing this branch for over 30 years. Itzik, what's the secret to the world's best Rugelach? He said the answer is the secret ingredients is we make it from the bottom of our heart. It's made out of pure love. That's it? So I could come to... He said, and a little bit of conditor knowledge. But what are the main ingredients besides flour inside the Rugelach? What's that secret, or can you not say?
We're putting more chocolate than we're putting dough.
More chocolate than dough, that's important.
And we're doing a very special dough that keep it soft, and we put sauce on it. And people like it.
Actually, we're going to buy in a couple of minutes something to take home for my boys, but you ship abroad, nachon?
Yes.
And how much?
Done it.
You've just done it?
We just done, like 1 month ago.
And you sell it, you send it frozen?
Yeah.
So people get it and they put it with instructions, fantastic. So if somebody wants to do that, they just Google Marzipan, Jerusalem, fantastic. Itzik, the only thing I have left to say to you is Shana Tova, may a year, a sweet year, and a year of lots of health and lots of business. So definitely, buddy, I brought these home for my 2 boys, but here's the classic way you eat Rugelach. Clean your hands, Corona, remove your mask, make sure you don't have any smell of that heavy alcohol on your hands, and then you open it up. Now, I'm going to ask my photographer to put her hand on the bottom and to tell me what the temperature is of these Rugelach. Hot, they're very hot, they're very warm, they're right out of the oven. And none of you can see this on the video, but it's actually juicy and dripping. You see, I don't want to say it's low calorie because it's not, but you ready? Wow. Nothing compares to Marzipan Bakery Rugelach right out of the oven. Shana Tova.
I will change, and I will say something does, and that is the fresh dates they had in one of the earlier videos. I gave you a taste, visually at least, and you could also hear the sounds of the marketplace. In answer to the question, I think it was Doug you asked in terms of food, what are the easiest recipes? Look, years ago, we lived in England 20 years ago, and Jamie Oliver was very popular, known there as the naked chef, because he was using a lot of natural and raw ingredients. And I think that's the key to the Israeli diet, a lot of raw ingredients. So have a lot of spices in your kitchen. My wife is vegan and she's gluten-free. So on a Friday night, we'll have fish and some sort of vegetarian options, but they're really, really easy dishes in there. He's got a great salad that I've started to make that is based on spinach and almonds, but unique things like sumac. There's another dish that I make that is a roasted butternut squash with tahina on top of it. It's the simplest dish you can imagine, except my youngest son doesn't like butternut squash, so I throw in a couple of sweet potatoes, but you need to adorn it with za'atar. So get a couple of the major spices, but I think the key to good Israeli cooking is having and using a lot of fresh and raw ingredients. And again, you go to supermarkets and you don't find many prepackaged things that you just have to add hot water or put it into a microwave for a few minutes, because people still do a lot of the basic, cooking from scratch in the Israeli kitchen. So hopefully I've given you something to hunger for as Some of you I see are already eating lunch. Some of you are getting ready for lunch. As Dan nudges me that we're approaching 1:15. But as I said at the outset, you really get a sense of the diversity of Israel when you walk to the Machane Yehudah market. When you see Ethiopian restaurants opening up now, and we see Georgian, as in Georgia, the country, not Georgia, where they just had an election yesterday. It's because we're now celebrating the difference and the diversity of Israeli society rather than the homogenization of society on many levels, including the food in the early 2 generations of Israeli society. So that's all I got to say. If you got any more questions, please. You have to unmute yourself and ask the question, though.
Mike, I'm going to just jump in here for a second as we wrap up. Thank you so much. I had to go and get my dates while you were talking, just because I.
Oh.
And they're out of a plastic box, and I don't even know how old they are.
You got that.
But they're good. They're good. I just want to make a couple of comments. First, I really want to thank you again, Mike, and I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. You know, one of the takeaways for me is that, you know, having been to Israel since I was a young child, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s, Israel now has its own cuisine. It is not imported from Eastern Europe. It's not, you know, even necessarily Mizrahi per se, or, you know, from Sephardic countries. It is its own fusion, its own taste and palate and menu. And it is certainly not the Israel that many of us, as you described, you know, grew up with, where there were no options and no choices. And it continues to evolve and become more and more of its own, you know, have its own place in the smorgasbord of foods and cultures. And I just think that continues along those lines of all the things that make a country, is when you have your own cuisine, you have legitimacy in that way.
I mean, you Rabbi, when you take the Torah out of the ark, you always say, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, which is true. You know, out of Jerusalem goes forth Torah and morality and everything else. And now we say, you know, out of Tel Aviv comes high-tech nation. But I think out of Jerusalem in particular, but Israel in general, comes a healthy eating cuisine, which is relatively new. Again, 3 decades ago, you didn't have that, and I think it's a great Israeli export, and you should celebrate it if you can.
Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to say is that, you know, we've heard a lot about the Middle Eastern diet and how much healthier it is. You know, when Israel went through this period, I remember, where there was a lot of Western influence, particularly on the breakfast menu. And Israel had, like most Western countries have had, you know, a problem with obesity and blood sugars and those kinds of things. And I think that part of this embracing of this native Israeli menu, you know, has had a significant impact on the health of the Israeli society. At least that seems to be what I have seen, as that has, you know, changed over time. The you know, cereal is still, I think, a staple of many of Israeli breakfasts, but you know, the amount of creative dishes that come out of relatively small kitchens in these small, you know, apartments and you know, and really very efficiency kind of homes in many places is really remarkable. Again, part of the Israeli story.
It has to do with creativity, and it has to do with spontaneity, and it has to do with, you know, all these things that you read in Startup Nation. It's true, and I see this for my kids. Like, I, as a tour guide, don't have a lot of time to cook, but now as a tour guide during Corona, I've got a lot of time to cook. And I said to my wife a couple of weeks ago, every week I do the shopping, and I always get the, you know, the same raw organic tahina, and we make it. I mean, it's basically the sesame that somebody's already ground for you, and then I add my garlic and my lemon and my salt and my pepper and water and whatever else. And I'm like, why do we buy the packaged stuff? Because it's so much easier to buy the packaged stuff. But here it's so easy to buy the raw stuff. Same thing with hummus. Michelle has now gotten me buying the hummus, so she soaks them overnight and then she cooks them and she peels them. It makes it easier to digest, and then we have homemade hummus. So it's just a matter of time. And I think with Corona, most of us have a lot more time at home. So I will encourage you to go raw, look at online, particularly for ottolenghi. There's some amazingly easy recipes. I'll give you one, and with this, I'll turn back to you, Dan, and that is, take a cabbage, cut the cabbage. It's called cabbage steak. You cut the cabbage, you put it in the oven, you put on salt, coarse salt. You call it kosher. We just call it coarse salt, because every salt you buy here in the supermarket is kosher. Add a little pepper, lemon, olive oil, bake it till it's brown on both sides, and you've got an unbelievable, very, very easy meal. Do the same thing with cauliflower, do the same thing with broccoli, and then if you want a real treat, take that tahina that you've made and just pour it on top, and you've got an unbelievably easy, quick, and healthy meal.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. I will just share because inspired. So we made a falafel the other night at home, and here's my ground chickpeas. And you're right, it's so much easier to do it on your own. And then the end result, of course, was this delicious meal here. This is in lieu of me actually eating lunch today. So there's my Israeli meal, and you can do this at home. You can make this at home, and we have a number of wonderful chefs in the congregation that can help you with this too. Mike, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. If you've been monitoring what's going on in the States right now, President-elect Biden of the United States just either is speaking or finished speaking, and it seems to have quite, in the time that we've been here talking about the food and the wonders of Israel, it has been unraveling there at the Capitol, but it looks like order is being somewhat restored. But there has been some significant violence and damage to property and even injuries. Terrible things. And so our hearts and our thoughts are with all the people of the world and those that we care and love about the most in the midst of the pandemic and all the other inequalities are going on, and then this strife in the United States. There's so much going on in the world. We need community more than ever. And even if that's community that stretches across oceans from here to Israel, Mike, it's good to be connected to you. Good luck in your lockdown. And we all pray that the vaccines that Israel is distributing, that we'll all learn from that model and be able to replicate it around the world to get it to those that need it most soonest. Thank you all very, very much. Hopefully we'll see you in another couple of weeks for Mike's next class, and stay safe.
Thanks. Hi, Iris. Bye. I'll see you all in a couple of weeks. 21st. Bye, guys.